Hi, I'm Phil Brock. This is Brock and Your Block, and today we're staying in Santa Monica's oldest neighborhood. That's right, today we're going to talk about Ocean Park with local historian and longtime resident Richard Orton. Behind me, Santa Monica's Shotgun House. I'm staying with a longtime resident in Santa Monica. I see him all throughout our city, but his specialty is the neighborhood he's lived in for many, many years, Ocean Park. And we're staying at the Historic Preservation House right now on the eve of its first anniversary with Richard Orton. Richard, how long have you lived in Santa Monica?
I moved to this neighborhood in 1970 when I was going to UCLA, and I've lived here ever since.
So you're a proud Bruin.
Absolutely.
Okay. Go Bruins.
Bruins.
There you go. How did your interest in the history of Ocean Park get fostered?
I've always been interested in local history, no matter where I've lived. I grew up in Michigan, and I was always interested in the history of that area. And when I moved out here, that naturally transferred. I gradually, over the years, got to know more and more, talked to people from the old timers that used to live here. And it's just a very interesting neighborhood that was developed like at the turn of the last century.
Now, what is your field of expertise? What did you do with your life in Santa Monica?
Well, my career was mostly as an art director. I worked for the department stores, the May Company, the Broadway, the Bullocks, Robinsons. I worked at all of them at one point or another.
So, all those are now part of LA's history.
Absolutely. And then my later career working at Belkin Components down in Playa Vista, and where I did package design.
Ah, very cool. Mm-hmm. I probably bought some of the items that you packaged.
I hope you did.
There you go. So, history, Ocean Park. Tell us a little bit about the history of Ocean Park.
Well, it really got started as a beach community south of the city, and it was Abbott Kinney and others who bought tracts of land down here at the beach. And some of the tracts were big tracts and some were smaller ones. All were subdivided from a tract bought by Nancy Lucas in 1875. And it was a huge chunk of land. It goes east to 20th Street. It forms the southern boundary of the city now. She originally bought the land from a Spanish family, and it developed, in strange little increments. And that's why you have the funny road alignment in Ocean Park that you have. That was because of the tracts. This is another thing I find really interesting in looking at neighborhoods. They're called Sanborn maps, and they are insurance company maps that go back to the 1880s. The ones for Santa Monica that I have here are from 1909, and this particular page I've turned to shows the old Arcadia Hotel that was there until 1912, and it was the stopping point for people, the fashionable people that were coming to Santa Monica. There was even an attempted murder that happened there one time.
Griffith J. Griffith.
That's the guy.
But he was the person who ultimately gave Los Angeles Griffith Park.
One of my interests in my neighborhood got started with this old postcard, and it's from about 1905. They were printed in Germany and hand-tinted. This is of my neighborhood, exactly where I live today. And this postcard we can date to 1905 and earlier, because there's writing at the bottom of the postcard. Until 1907, you couldn't send a message on the back of the card. It could only be the address.
Looking at this picture, Ocean Park was already a developed community in 1907.
It was well built up by the turn of the last century. And there's two buildings. The house over here with the hip roof is still there, and the house over here is still here, the one across the street. And they're both on 3rd Street. And this house is under construction at the time because you can see the delivery wagon with the horse in front of the building and nail kegs to the side.
What is a hip-roofed house?
In the east, I call them Dutch colonials, and it has a eave on it that has a break in it, much like a barn would have, a classic barn shape. It shows up in the 1905 pictures here.
So this is obviously a turn-of-the-century house. And a lot of these, I presume, were also developed as weekend getaways for Angelinos who lived in downtown Los Angeles, because you have the smaller beach tracts, especially in the southern part of Ocean Park.
Absolutely. The original houses, and this Shotgun House is one of them, that were probably initially along the ocean front. They didn't own the land, but they owned the house that it was on. And eventually the people who owned the land decided that they wanted to build their own houses on it. So the houses that were there had to move. And they were moved to the less expensive lots on 2nd and 3rd Street that only cost $100 a piece.
So really they're sort of the precursors of trailer parks.
This house is much of the configuration of a trailer. In other words, a shotgun house means that you could theoretically shoot a shotgun in the front door and the shot would go out the back door and not hit anything.
And I know that a lot of them were also prefabs.
These houses were, some of them, prefabbed. And remember that the railroad and the streetcars came right down here. There was a turnaround at Hill Street, just a couple blocks south of here. So they could bring a house on a flatbed truck.
Oh, my grandfather moved a couple of houses in Santa Monica.
At the turn of the century, ostrich feathers were very popular with ladies' hats. They were very profitable. There was an ostrich farm. It had a few acres up on Hill Street.
It closed down. The birds were impossible to raise near the ocean. So the history of Ocean Park. When was it annexed by Santa Monica?
About 1907, probably for water purposes.
They had all that salt water, but nothing to drink.
Well, there was plenty of drinking, even during Prohibition. Speaking of drinking, the BPOE building, it's the major building over at Main and Pier. It was built in 1927 for the Elks.
That's a high-rise.
Yes, it is. It's about 5 stories tall. The Brotherhood of the Fraternal Order of Elks. They had a smaller building over on Main Street, over about where the Village is now. During the 20s, they were very popular. And one of the reasons I think they were popular is because I think it was drinking that was happening at the Elks facilities during Prohibition. It wasn't a problem for being raided because the police department probably had many members there as well.
Michael Flinkman, just want you to know, I want to see where the speakeasy is in your building. That's the Elks building.
In 1927, they moved in with great fanfare. They had bands and cheerleaders with them going great guns. It's beautiful inside until the Depression. And the Depression hit them hard. The membership dropped. People couldn't afford the extravagance of belonging to a club anymore. And they sold the building just 6 years later in 1933, and it was converted to an apartment building. There used to be a gymnasium, 2-story height gymnasium in the front of the building. And if you look at pictures and compare them, pictures from the original building and the way it is now, you can see that the 4th floor has been partitioned off and another floor created to create apartments in that level as well.
What is significant about Ocean Park, and how do we keep it a wonderful neighborhood in our city?
A few years ago, they wanted to build a parking structure behind Main Street, 6 stories tall. And the neighborhood got behind it and said, we don't want that. The neighborhood is really strong, knows how to voice their opinion about what they want at City Hall. And I think that'll keep Ocean Park a wonderful place to live that it is today.
So what are some things that a visitor to Ocean Park should look for that are special?
Well, of course, the Shotgun House is a really wonderful destination. There's a fabulous beach out there on the west side of Ocean Park that's really good to visit. There's the Carnegie Library across the street from where we are right now. There's the Merle Norman House that's up the hill, where Merle Norman built after she succeeded in mixing her cosmetics on her kitchen stove. The Merle Norman factory right behind us here. There's the a wonderful house down the street that was one of the original churches, and that was moved here a long time ago. It used to be a Methodist church, and now it's a residence. That's a fun place to see.
Ocean Park has changed greatly over the years. On my mother's first date, she met my father by the Santa Monica Pier. He was a Marine. They were going to shoot off the fireworks on July 4th on his aircraft carrier. And they came down to Ocean Park to walk, to talk, to have some ice cream. Tell me a little bit about POP and Ocean Park before the 60s.
Pacific Ocean Park was supposed to be a terrific place. It was developed in 1958, I think, and CBS money was behind it. And it was very popular when it opened. The attendance rivaled almost Disneyland. It was so popular. And then the city decided that the neighborhood just east of Pacific Ocean Park was blighted. The buildings there were 50 or 60 years old. It was a small neighborhood. People who lived there were older. They couldn't really defend themselves against what the development that the city wanted to do. And so the neighborhood was torn down. And the proposal was to tear down the beach tract from the Venice border all the way up to Pico and line that with high-rises that would be like Miami Beach. And they only completed the part up to Ocean Park Boulevard, and there's just 2 high-rises, the Santa Monica Shores buildings.
Ocean Park Boulevard, directly south of us, was widened, houses torn down because that was supposed to be the end of a new highway that connected POP with the world. POP was wonderful. I went there as a little kid when they opened and went back often until it closed.
A huge parking lot that's out there is because of POP. That was where people parked to go. And it's a wonderful parking lot that's empty most of the time.
Well, that means maybe we should green more of it and remove some of the asphalt from the beach, because that asphalt leaches oil into our ocean and helps pollute it all the time.
When I first moved to this area, I moved here because it was inexpensive. This was the run-down part of Santa Monica, and rents were cheaper here. My apartment when I moved in was $130 a month, and it was right around the corner from this wonderful place I like to go to called the Orr House. And the Orr House had a heyday from the late 60s to, I think, to the early 2000s. And my most favorite occasion there was their 18th annual going out of business sale, where every drink all day was a quarter.
I did spend some nights while I was at UCLA hanging out at the Orr House.
Well, the Orr House has a wonderful past, and most of it we can't talk about probably, but it was founded by a guy named Al Arringer, who was a pilot for Western Airlines. And he also had a degree, apparently, from the restaurant school at Cornell. Every place he landed a plane, he started a restaurant with the same formula. Sawdust on the floors, he rented in a cheap neighborhood and put lots of debris on the ceiling. He had things that they bought from prop houses, movie props and road signs and old carriages and baby buggies, everything. And it was really a visual feast to go in there. It was a lot of fun.
The Orr House was a great place. His companion restaurant, Buffalo Chips, did not sell buffalo chips. However, it was also a great place to eat.
At the Orr House one time, somebody threw a firebomb through the front window, a Molotov cocktail, and the whole place went up in flames, but left the building intact. They wanted to rebuild. They needed a whole bunch of new old stuff to hang from the ceilings. Well, luckily, right across the street, they had a warehouse full of old things. They were populating lots of restaurants with this material. The warehouse where they kept all this material is now the Fish Enterprise Company.
Enterprise Fish Company. He also owned another restaurant on the block.
He did. He owned the Omelet Parlor. But the Omelet Parlor was a great place, too. I mean, it was just one of the many wonderful eateries that Al Arringer and his partners started, and it closed just a few years ago.
Well, there's also a couple of buildings on the southwest corner of Ocean Park Boulevard as well.
They were moved there, I think, in the early 70s, and one is the Roy Jones House. Roy Jones was the son of the founder of Santa Monica, John Percival Jones. One is the Victorian Restaurant, and that's where they have the farmers market every Sunday.
Right. And it's a wonderful farmers market. Ocean Park is a great neighborhood that has a lot of character and a lot of characters in it. And it's a wonderful part of the city of Santa Monica. For Brock and Your Block, I'm Phil Brock. We'll see you next time.